Hello, children. How are you all? I hope you are taking good care of yourself. Today's English class is from the Moments textbook, chapter 5, The Happy Prince. I hope everybody has your textbooks in front of you. Yes? Say yes. Okay. This is written by Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde's full name was Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde, born on 16th October 1854, died 30th November 1900, was an Irish poet and playwright. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, the early 1890s saw him become one of the most popular playwright in London. Oscar Wilde is a great story writer of England. By the sharpness of his intelligence, he presented himself as a writer of enduring merit. He becomes very famous for his witty and brilliant conversations. He was the follower of Pater. Wilde was born of professional and literary parents. His father, Sir William Wilde, was Ireland's leading ear and eye surgeon, who also published books on archaeology, folklore, and a satirist, Jonathan Swift. His mother, who wrote under the name Ferenza, was a revolutionary poet and an authority on the Celtic myth and folklore. As a story writer, Wilde had cultivated high artifice in style and bizarre in subject matter. He prefers elaborate dress over the normal. He challenges the accepted social, moral, and artistic norms. The appeal of his writing is intellectual. His chief aim is to jolt his readers out of complexity. He has a polished style. His breath is very fine, scintillating. He finds charming fantasies and quaint humors in his stories. The Happy Prince is one of the finest short stories by Oscar Wilde. Here he criticizes the insensitivity, selfishness, and shallow thinking of men. According to him, worldly pleasures can give only temporary happiness. The Happy Prince realized the futility of the belief after his death. Futility means uselessness, yes. Good actions, clarity, and also good charity and compassion brings enduring peace and happiness. Those who try to reduce the misery of others are truly religious. God loves those who love others. This is the main theme of the Happy Prince. You already would have learned this story in your lower classes, somewhere in 5th or 6th class. The story is about a prince. When the prince was alive, he was very happy. After his death, a big statue of his was erected on a pedestal. From there, the statue of Prince could see the entire city, and at the time he saw the miseries of the people. He saw the poor people, the homeless, their hunger and starvation. I hope when we travel and somewhere in our path we find people suffering from hunger, starvation, homeless people. They suffer, isn't it? I hope everybody would have. If yes, then say yes. The prince was sad to see all these miseries, sadness of the people, like how we even feel sad for them and we do very little. The little which we can at that moment, we do it, right? Okay. So, this chapter we will study the story of this prince. I want everybody to have your textbooks. Make a note of the meanings. You will find meanings everywhere, wherever I have put it with the blue. You can just make a note of it in your textbook. Okay? Is it fine? Okay. High above the city, on a tall column. Column here indicates tall buildings. Okay? Stood the statue of the happy prince. He was just straight in the mid of the city. The statue of a prince stood on a high platform overlooking the city. The prince was called a happy prince because when he was alive, he always remained very happy. Upon his death, a big statue of his was erected in the center of the city in his remembrance. The statue of this happy prince was covered with thin layers of fine gold, and instead of eyeballs, there were two bright shining sapphire stones. In the handle of his sword, a bright ruby stone was placed. So these were some valuable things which were, anybody can stole. But this statue just stood in the center and having its beauty, charm. Just imagine a golden plated statue with sapphire eyes and a ruby shining on the handle of the sword. So one night, swallow is a tiny bird. Although it is not a human being, still the writer is referring to it as he and his. He says that all the friends of his, that is this swallow, had flown away to Egypt 6 weeks ago. This bird did not go with them, but later it thought of going to Egypt to his friends. So it was on its way to Egypt. This bird kept on flying on its way to Egypt, and at night it reached the city of the happy prince. It wanted to stay somewhere for the night. It thinks upon where to stay at night. The bird says that hopefully the city had made some arrangements for it to stay. Obviously, the bird does not mean what it is saying, but we can say that probably the bird is being humorous. Now, when this tiny bird saw this huge statue of the happy prince, it thought of staying there for the night. So the bird thought that it was a good place to spend the night. There was shelter and lot of fresh air. So the bird came and alighted. It stopped and sat in between the feet of the statue, and When the bird sat in between the feet of the happy prince, it was surrounded with gold. It thought that it had a bedroom made up of gold because it was surrounded by gold all around. As it was about to sleep, as it was putting its head under the its wing, suddenly a large drop of water fell on its head. Tap! The bird was surprised because all of a sudden a drop of water fell on it. It thought that neither was it raining nor the rainy season was going on. Just then another drop of water fell on it. The swallow thought that the statue was useless because it was not able to protect it. See how stupid this thought is. How can a statue protect anybody from the rain? So he thought he should not sleep under the statue. The swallow thought that it was better if it took shelter in a chimney of a house and thought to move away from there because the statue was not able to protect from the rain. Before the bird flew away, the third drop of water fell on him and it looked up. What it is? What did he see? Let's find out, he thought. As soon as the bird looked up, he saw that the eyes of the happy prince statue were filled with tears. These drops of water were the tears drops falling off the statue's golden cheeks. When the swallow looked at Happy Prince's face, it was looking beautiful in the moonlight. The little bird's heart was filled with pity for the weeping statue. It asked the statue that who it was. The little bird was waiting. The statue replied that it was the happy prince. Now, the happy prince narrated his story to the swallow. The happy prince said that when he was alive and he had a human heart. Human heart means the heart which beats is alive at that time. He was not aware what tears were and what sorrow was, as he lived in a palace where there was happiness all around. All the people who used to work in his court used to call him Happy Prince because he used to be happy all the time and he had not seen sorrow at all. Now, children, is it possible anybody to be so happy at all the times and not even experience sorrow? Not possible, right? But here, this happy prince experienced happiness in his whole life until he was alive. And he said that he lived happily and died in happiness only. When he had a human heart, he never cried. He was not aware what tears were because he had seen happiness only and never faced any sorrow. Now, when he was dead, they had put him so high in the form of a statue on a pedestal that he could see the whole city and the ugliness of the city. He could see that there were so many people living in misery, lack of food, hunger, money, homelessness. Now, when the statue's heart was made up of lead, a metal, although he did not have any feelings, then also when it saw all the sadness, it became sad and wept. It cried. When the happy prince was telling his sad story, the swallow was thinking about something else in his mind. The bird wondered that the statue of the prince was not made up of solid gold. It was surprised. He thought that from outside the statue was covered with gold. But as it said that the heart was made up of lead and not of gold, it realized that it was hollow and was not made up of solid gold. Saw that the statue was very sad and was crying. So he did not make any personal remarks. It did not comment anything about the statue because it was giving the value of the statue's feeling. The statue continues its story. It spoke in a very musical voice that far away there is a house of a poor woman. The window of her house was open and it could see through the window that she was sitting near the table. Now, I hope till here you have understood the bird which is on its way to Egypt. It's taking rest here for that night, and this happy prince statue had said his story. Now he is narrating further. He is telling one by one what it is seeing. So this woman, the window of her house was open and it could see through the window that she was sitting near the table. Her face was thin and she was tired. Her hands were rough and had become red because they had been pricked by the needle. The woman is a seamstress. A seamstress is a woman who makes a living by sewing, like stitching dresses. The woman was embroidering flowers on a gown of the queen's maid, who would walk along with the queen during the court ball. The statue said that the lady who was embroidering the gown had a little child who was not well. He was suffering from fever and was asking his mom to give him oranges. His mother was very poor. She had no money. She could not afford for oranges. She could only give him water, that also river water, and that is why the little boy was crying. He didn't want it. So the happy prince's statue requested the swallow to take out the ruby stone from the handle of its sword and give it to that lady. It added that its feet were fastened to the platform, because of which it could not move. If not, it could have done by itself. The swallow replied that it had to go to Egypt. Its friends were waiting for it. The swallow said that its friends were in Egypt again, and they were flying near the Nile River and talking to the large lotus flowers which grew there. Soon they would go to sleep, and so it wanted to reach Egypt at the earliest. The statue requested the swallow to stay with him for one night. He asked him to be his messenger and work on his behalf. He said that the boy was very thirsty and the mother was very sad. Once again, the swallow opposed his request and said that it did not like boys, so why should it help the boy? Moreover, it had to go to Egypt. The happy prince was so sad that the swallows felt sorry for him. It said that it was very cold there, but it would stay with him for one night, and the next morning it would do his work. The happy prince thanked him. Finally, the swallow took out the ruby stone from the happy prince's wand, and the bird took the ruby in its beak and flew over the town. As the swallow was on its way to the poor woman's house, it passed to the cathedral. Now, cathedral is a church, and on the church tower, white colored marble angels were sculpted. Then the bird reached the palace. He crossed the palace and he could hear the sound of dancing from inside the palace. When the swallow was crossing over the palace, a girl came out on the balcony along with his lover. She was hoping that the gown which was given to the seamstress for embroidering would be ready on time. She was talking about the same gown on which that lady was doing embroidering, to whom the bird had to give the ruby stone. When the swallow flew over the river, ships also came along the way. Lanterns were hanging on their sails. Finally, the swallow reached the woman's house. The boy was suffering from fever, and for that reason, he was not able to go to sleep. So he was turning left and right on his bed, and his mother was very tired due to work for long and had fallen asleep. The swallow put the ruby stone on the table near the thimble. After keeping the ruby stone on the table, the swallow went near the boy as his mother was sleeping and no one was taking care of him. It shook its wing near him, because of which the boy could felt the cool air and felt better. The boy felt that he was getting better and went to sleep. With this, we can make out that the swallow was a kind hearted bird. The bird flew back and went to the statue of Happy Prince and told him what all he did then. Now the bird felt warm. It says that it was very strange that it was feeling little warm even though the weather was very cold. The prince said that it was feeling warm because it had done a good deed. It had helped someone. After listening to Happy Prince, the swallow started thinking, and when he started thinking, he felt sleepy because whenever he thought, he used to feel sleepy. Now, the next morning, the swallow bird went to the river and took a bath and thought that night he would reach Egypt. He was very happy. So the swallow bird visited all the monuments of the city and finally he went and sat on the high tower of the church. When it was night and the moon rose in the sky, the bird went to the Happy Prince and sought permission to leave for Egypt. Now, again, Happy Prince requested this bird to stay with him for one more night. And the bird replied that he needed to go to Egypt because his friends were waiting for him. Now, here the Happy Prince is telling the swallow about his second work. He says that far away across the city, I could see in a small dark room at the top of the house a young man is sitting. He is sitting on a desk on which the papers were spread all over. And he was trying to work hard. He had a glass lying near him and in which withered flowers were lying. Further, the Happy Prince gave a description of that boy. He said that his hair were brown and crisp, which meant that he had not taken bath for a long time. His lips were red like a pomegranate and he had big dreamy eyes. That means this boy was very ambitious and hardworking. Further, the Happy Prince said that this boy needed to finish writing a play. He was a writer, a playwright, and he had to give the play to the director after writing. But he did not have strength to write any more because he was feeling very cold. The boy had no money, so that's why there were no fire in his fireplace, and he was very hungry also, due to which he was feeling very weak. The bird understood what Happy Prince was trying to tell him. He knew that Happy Prince wanted to help this boy. So he agreed to stay back for one more night, and further, the bird asked the Happy Prince if he should take another ruby stone to give it to the young playwright. Now, young playwright here is the boy who writes play, just like he had given it to the old lady. But Prince said that it was very sad that he did not have any more ruby stones with him. Happy Prince said that now he had his eyes, which were made up of very precious and rare sapphire stones, which had been bought thousands of years ago from India. So the Happy Prince told Swallow to take out one sapphire and give it to the boy. The swallow was very sad to learn that the Happy Prince wanted to give his eye to that boy, and he started crying. He told Happy Prince that he cannot do it. But then the Happy Prince ordered the swallow to do what he had to. So finally the bird took out one eye, the sapphire, out of the prince's eye and flew to the young man's garret. There was a hole on the roof of the room, so the swallow entered the room through that hole. The boy was sitting with his head on his hands, and that's why he did not hear the flutter of this bird's wing. And when he looked up, he saw the sapphire stone lying on the dry flowers. When the boy saw that beautiful stone, he felt that some admirer, some person who praised him, had sent a gift for him. So he thought that with this he could now finish this play. Next morning, The swallow bird flew down to the harbor and sat on a mast of a ship. He spoke loudly that he was going to Egypt, and when it was night, it flew back to Happy Prince. Swallow once again told the Happy Prince that it had come to say goodbye. He was going to Egypt. And once again, Happy Prince requested Swallow to stay with him for one more night. Now, do you think, children, is it fair to make this bird stay for one more night? I hope you would have given your answer yes. Because sometimes to do some good, we need to sacrifice some happy moments in our life, right? So this bird also started thinking. The swallow said to the happy prince that the winter season had started and after some time it would start snowing. The weather in Egypt was warm and even the crocodile lay on the mud lazily there. So he told him to let him go to Egypt. He denied to stay for one night that moment. Now, this was a third assignment. The happy prince said that there was a match girl. She was a little girl, and all her matchsticks had fallen in the gutter in a sewage and got wet. All her matchsticks were spoilt, so she could not sell them and she would not earn any money. And when she would go home without money, then her father would get angry and beat her. For this reason, the girl was crying. Further, the happy prince said that she was not wearing shoes and or stockings and she had not covered her head. She was very poor. So he said to the bird to take out another sapphire from his eyes and give it to her so that her father didn't beat her. Swallow agreed to stay with him for one more night, but he refused to take out another sapphire because if he did that, the prince would be blind. And Happy Prince told Swallow to do what he had ordered him. So finally, the bird obeyed the Happy Prince's order. He took another sapphire stone from his eye and flew out to the match girl. And when he flew there and saw the match girl, he bent very low and kept the sapphire stone on the little girl's hand. The little girl was very happy to see the stone and she went home happily. When the swallow returned to the happy prince, he told him that now he was blind and so he could stay with him forever. But Happy Prince said to the swallow that he should go to Egypt, as he has already told that it's going to snow and a bird could not tolerate this climate and might die. But swallow refused and said that he would stay with him only and slept on the prince's feet. The swallow used to stay along with Happy Prince all the time and used to tell him the stories of the different places that he had visited. The Happy Prince said the swallow to tell him wonderful things but added that nothing was more wonderful than the suffering of people. No mystery was bigger than sadness. And he wants to know who all were sad in his kingdom. So he asked the swallow to go and let him know what he was seeing while flying over the city. So the swallow flew and took a round over the city and saw that the rich people were living happily in their beautiful houses and they were partying, while the poor were begging and sitting outside the gates. Then he went to the dark lane where there was no light also, and the poor people lived. There he saw that the children were hungry, due to which their faces had turned white. Further, the swallow saw the two little boys under the archway of the bridge. They were lying much close to each other so that they kept themselves warm. They were so poor they didn't have food, so they were trying to keep each other warm. Two children were starving and wondering that how hungry they were. Just then a watchman appeared and scolded them. He shouted and made them go away from there. The poor children kept wandering in the rain as they were homeless. Swallow went back to Happy Prince and told him what he had seen in the city. The Happy Prince told Swallow that his whole body was covered with fine gold. He could take tiny pieces of gold from his body and give it to the poor people in need. He could take tiny pieces of gold. All the living beings required money, and when they would get gold, they would be happy. Slowly, the swallow took out the gold layers from the statue of Happy Prince, and as he removed the layers of the gold, the Happy Prince's statue started looking dull and grey. As the statue of Happy Prince started looking dull and grey, the children grew happier because through it they were getting food to eat. Finally, it started snowing, and when a lot of snow fell, everything froze. Everyone was wearing clothes made up of fur. Small children were wearing red color caps and were roaming here and there. They were skating on the ice. Shallow Bird was feeling very cold, but he kept on sitting near the Happy Prince's statue. He did not want to leave him because he loved the Happy Prince now. The bird did not want to die, so he used to go to the bakery where the baker used to bake the bread, to eat the bread crumbs and try to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. So, how sweet this bird is, see? To keep himself alive, it is trying hard in this cold weather. How kind-hearted this bird is, isn't it, children? The swallow was aware that he was about to die. He had only enough strength to fly back to the statue of the Happy Prince, and he says, Happy Prince thought that the swallow wanted to go to Egypt. So he said that he was happy that finally the bird was going to Egypt. It said, Goodbye, dear prince. Will you let me kiss your hand? And now, when the swallow is about to die, he says to the Happy Prince that, Can I kiss your hand? Happy Prince said to the swallow that it had stayed there for a very long time and now it should go to Egypt. It wanted the bird to kiss its lips instead of the hands because the statue loved the bird now. The swallow bird said the Happy Prince that it was not going to Egypt because uh, it can't. It knows that it's going to die. But to the house of death. He added that the deaths were a brother of sleep. He kissed the happy prince on his lips and fell down to the feet of happy princess and died. As soon as the bird died on the happy prince's feet, an unusual sound came out from the statue. The sound was of breaking of statue's heart, which was made up of lead. The heart broke because the death of this bird, the beloved bird. But it is sad that it was so cold that the heart broken into two pieces. The next day, the next morning, the mayor of the city, along with his councillors, was talking about and taking a round of the area where the statue of Happy Prince were erected. And when he crossed the statue and looked up at it, he said that the statue of Happy Prince looked untidy. Now, just think, children, how ugly this mayor's hut is. And another side, that bird who had sacrificed its life to just help Happy Prince, make him happy and make other people happy. And this mayor is thinking that the statue is so ugly now. How shabby, indeed, he says. The council always agreed with whatever the mayor used to say, right? So they also asserted that the statue looked untidy. The mayor noticed that the ruby stone which was placed in the handle of the sword was missing. The sapphire from the statue's eyes were also missing, and the layer of the gold from its body also was missing. So there was a suggestion. The mayor said that it seemed as it was the statue of a beggar, and the two councillors agreed with it that. The mayor noticed that a dead bird was lying on the feet of the statue. Then he told the town councillor to pass an order that birds were not allowed to die on the feet of the statue, and the town clerk made a note of the suggestion and given by him. The art professor of the university said that now the statue of Happy Prince did not look beautiful and was not useful anymore, and so they should demolish it. How bad this art professor! If he really knew what this Happy Prince has done, then definitely he would have not said it. But certain things has to be seen through mind, right? Agreed, children? Yeah. So they melted the statue, which was made up of lead, in a furnace. The supervisor of the foundry saw a strange thing. The heart of the Happy Prince's statue, which was broken into two pieces, were now melted in the furnace. So they threw it as it is in the dust heap. Coincidentally, they threw the heart of the Happy Prince where the dead swallow were also lying. And he just said, "Bring me the two precious thing in the city." God to his angels. And God asked one of his angels to bring him. God said it had brought the right thing. It had chosen the right things, which were indeed the most precious thing of the city. He said that the bird would always sing in the garden of the paradise, and the Happy Prince would stay in his city of gold and admire him. So that was the blessing given by the God to this beautiful hearts, a bird, and this happy prince. They lived in heaven. The moral of the story is very significant. Through this story, Oscar Wilde tries to show that worldly glory and riches do not the glory and riches do not bring happiness and peace of mind. For that good works and that pious deeds are essential things. The story tells us that men should try to help the poor and the needy. The title of the story is apt. It is justified and highly appropriate. Generally, a rich and powerful person is considered happy. But here, the story writer shows that the real happiness lies in good deeds and noble actions. After that, the protagonist comes to know the reality. Actually, he becomes happy after death. Thus, the title Happy Prince is appropriate. In short, the Happy Prince is very fine and a very moving story. Here, the author has shown his genius. The style of this story is marked by dialogues and similes. So, let's give me a really salute to this kind heart and hope even we follow such kindness in our lives too. Whenever we see some people in sorrow or they need some help, we do help them. Isn't it, children? I hope you all will, because you all are kind hearted. And I'm sure that you will shoulder the responsibility at that moment when you want to help somebody. Isn't it? Okay. Now, let's have the summary of the Happy Prince very fast. Once in a town, there lived a prince. He was called the Happy Prince because he had been happy in his life. After his death, the statue was erected on a tall pedestal in the middle of the town. The statue was covered with gold and two precious sapphire stones embedded in the eyes. A ruby stone had been fitted into the handle of his sword. From there, he would see all the place and realize that people lived in a lot of poverty and misery. This sight saddened the prince, and being helpless, he would only weep to see the plight of his people. One day, a shallow bird was flying through the city on its way to Egypt to meet its friend. On the way, it took shelter for the night at the feet of the statue of the happy prince. The bird realized that the statue was weeping and, upon inquiry, realized the plight of the prince. The helpless prince requested the bird to help it by becoming its messenger. After initial refusal, the bird agreed and took the ruby stone out of the sword hilt and delivered it to a poor seamstress. The next morning, as it went to bid goodbye, the statue convinced him to stay back for one more day. That day, the bird was asked to remove the sapphire stone from one of the statue's eyes and delivered it to a young playwright. Also, on the third day, the bird had to pull out the second sapphire stone from for a poor match girl. But this time, the weather had become cold and the bird had developed an attachment with the statue. The bird did not want to leave the statue, which had now become blind. The happy bird and the prince now were like together. And now the bird asked the happy prince asked the bird to go around the city and inform him the condition of the poor living there. The bird told him that the rich were making merry, happy, and while the poor lived in misery. As the happy prince did not have any more precious stones, he ordered the bird to remove the gold foils from his body and distribute among the living who needed money for survival. Gradually, the statue of the prince lost its covering of gold and became dull and grey. On the other hand, the poor became joyous and they got bread to eat. The swallow bird was now unable to withstand the cold weather and realized that death was approaching. It informed the statue that it had to leave, and the statue, who loved the bird, asked it to kiss him. As the bird died and fell at the statue's feet, a strange sound came out of the statue, and the sound of breaking its heart. Although the statue's heart was made up of lead, it broke and it was overwhelmed with affection towards the bird. When the statue was melted and in the furnace, the heart did not melt and was thrown in the garbage. It landed near the shallow's body. God's angels took both the heart, both the precious thing, the dead swallow and the broken heart, to him as they were the most precious thing on land. So that was the story of the happy prince. Go through the lesson, read it 2 or 3 times. If you want to hear the video, you can hear it again and understand. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. I have put few question answers here. Go through those question answers. Answer the assignment questions. Okay? I hope everybody will definitely have done some kind deeds in your life and will be proceeding to do it in your life as this to sacrifice their life. I'm not telling you to sacrifice anything, but please do something good for everybody around you who are suffering from one or other sorrow. Okay? So that was the lesson. If you have any doubt, you can call or you can text children. Okay, take care. Bye.